Your Excellency, Ambassador Reilly, Mr. President, dear colleagues, AOI executives and dear students. This is your special day because all of you have scored straight A's in your classes in the previous semester. But it's also a special day because our keynote is a special guest. It's Her Majesty's Ambassador to Morocco, His Excellency Mr. Thomas Reilly. We will have three parts to this evening. We will start with the President, who will introduce the keynote and keynote speaker, followed by, we'll take time for a few questions and answers. Second part, we will have dinner. There's a buffet outside, so I'll be calling on 2 tables at a time to move. We have two buffets over there. And the third part of the evening, you will be receiving your certificates. So this is the plan for this evening. Mr. President.
For this evening, I am honored and pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Thomas Reilly, the Ambassador of the United Kingdom. As you all know, the United Kingdom is going through very challenging times, deciding how to exit the European Union. There was a referendum, the people have chosen, regardless of what people think of it, that was the decision then. Is it going to change? If any change is going to happen, it'll have to go through the people again, through the vote. But this is a very challenging time for the governing party, for the UK, and for the European Union. And as you probably can guess, it will not be without impact on the relations we have. Morocco and the UK, the Kingdom of Morocco, the United Kingdom, with the UK as part of the European Union or with the UK as independent. So His Excellency Ambassador Reilly has accepted to share his thoughts this evening with us on the Brexit, where it is today, where it might lead, and after the end of March, that's 29th or 30th of March, after the end of March, what could be the impact on the Moroccan-British relations. So His Excellency is very knowledgeable about our area, our part of the world. He served in the diplomatic corps for about 20 years and has served in Yemen, Egypt, Oman, Saudi, and Morocco. So he's very knowledgeable. He speaks fluently, in addition to English, of course, Arabic and French and Spanish. So, and as you know, language doesn't happen in a vacuum. So it brings with it culture, it brings with it a way of seeing the world, a way of organizing one's thoughts and of understanding a culture. He also worked with the private sector and with the public sector. Worked with Shell company for some time and came at a crossroads where he had to choose either go fully private and make a career or go in the diplomatic corps and make a career. He chose the latter, and we're very happy for that. That's what gave us the opportunity to see him today. He's known in Morocco to be very dynamic, very outspoken, and energetic, and wanting so badly to develop Moroccan-British relations in various areas, not only diplomacy, but also culture, sports, education. So with no further ado, please join me in welcoming to the podium His Excellency Ambassador Reilly.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'd heard so much about this university, and I'm thrilled to be here with you this evening. Even more thrilled that it is such an auspicious occasion. So I know that the President has already said congratulations, but for me as well, congratulations. That's a huge achievement. I feel ill-equipped to speak to you this evening, given the august surroundings and also the quality of the students in front of me. So it is a genuine pleasure and an honour to be here with you this evening. I must say, when the President says I've been in diplomacy for 20 years, I suddenly feel rather old, and I was looking for my Zimmer frame. I don't feel that old. I feel quite sort of energetic. I do think that I'm incredibly privileged to have this position as an ambassador. I think it's one of those things that as I got to the end of my time with Shell, and Shell offered me the position of General Manager in Saudi Arabia, and I thought, gosh, that's a really attractive and great job to have, but actually there's something that I need to finish, and I think that's really important in life, to have a bit of a life plan and not just do the next thing in front of you. So I abandoned the big salary and the pension and the shares, and I went for a life of penury as a diplomat, and I don't regret it for a minute, because I think actually the President mentioned languages. Languages definitely give you a window onto the soul and the culture of another people, but beyond that, it is the international relations that make the world work. Education is a huge priority for me. I think it is the foundation from which everything springs, and if you don't have education, you don't have a functioning economy. If you don't have a functioning economy, you don't have the economic growth that pulls people up, that drives the social mobility, that creates the growth and the stability that we all need in our political life. And talking about stability, as the President says, I think it's fair to say that the UK is going through a period of profound change, a period of change which, certainly in my lifetime, I cannot remember the like. It is challenging every single piece of the fabric of the British society and indeed the constitutional makeup of the country itself. There was a very controversial referendum that was held in June 2016. We can argue till the cows come home about whether it was necessary. Personally, I don't think it was. But the government at that time had promised in its manifesto that it would hold a referendum, an in-out, yes-no, black and white referendum on membership of the European Union, and governments stand or fall by their manifesto. So the referendum was held, and by a very thin majority, about 1.8% or just under 2%, the decision was made to leave the European Union. Now, at that stage, there could have been, as there has been in other European countries, a decision to hold a further referendum. Are you sure? Like saying, do you want to get married? And your wife says yes, and you go, are you sure about that? I'll ask again just in case I get a different answer. And I think it is the right thing to do. Though myself, I'm absolutely against Brexit. I think it is the wrong decision to make. It is the decision that the government has made. And as a civil servant, I will do everything in my power to implement that, to make sure that it is a success. And the government chose to implement it, to trigger Article 50, and then said there won't be a referendum. And again, that is the right decision. You can't keep asking a question until you get an answer with which you're comfortable. So I think we are set. We are going to leave the European Union on the 29th of March next year. The UK will no longer be a member state of the European Union. Now, as a civil servant, you often have to implement policies of the government with which you disagree. If you can't implement them because you disagree, you leave the civil service. You don't continue to act in the civil service if you cannot implement. So regardless of my personal opinion about this, as I said, I will do everything in my power to implement it and to make it a success. And that is what a civil servant does. So Brexit is going to be challenging, and it will change the relationship that the UK has with the European Union and with other countries that have third-party agreements with the European Union. But it is a chance to completely reassess those relationships. And I think that is where Brexit offers something that is unique, that only comes once maybe in a generation, maybe even only once in a lifetime, to take your international relations right back to a zero-based review and say, where are the best interests of that country served? Is it in continuing to have relations with the European Union, or do we now need to look at a completely new set of relationships around the world? And that, for me, is the opportunity that's offered by Brexit. And it is an extraordinary opportunity. It's an opportunity which I never expected to happen. And now that it is in front of us, it's an opportunity that we should and will seize. And that means the relationship with Morocco will change. At the moment, our trading relationship with Morocco is through the FTA, the free trade agreement the association agreement that Morocco has signed, creating the free trade area between Morocco and the European Union. Once we leave the European Union, that agreement ceases to exist. So the UK and Morocco will have to negotiate a new agreement. And that new agreement is a chance for us all to look again at what we want. So there will be things that Morocco wants, there will be things that the UK wants. By way of example, at the moment there is a tariff-free quota, sorry to get into details, of 320,000 tonnes of tomatoes that Morocco exports every year to the European Union. Once Morocco exports more than those 320,000 tonnes, it has to pay a tariff. Of those 320,000 tonnes, approximately 60,000 tonnes go to the UK. So the UK would like to continue to receive those tomatoes, and Morocco would like to continue to export them. There are two ways of doing that. You can either say, from the 320,000 tonnes that you were exporting to Morocco, to the EU, we will take off the 60,000 tonnes that go to the UK, which means that you have less chance of exporting tomatoes to Morocco, and you keep the same overall quota. Or you can keep the EU quota and have a new quota for export to the UK. That increases the amount of tomatoes that Morocco can export. It's a silly, very small example, but those are the kind of opportunities that Brexit offers. Now I'm going to move away from Brexit. I'm sure you have lots of other questions on that, and I'd be delighted to talk about them. Before I do, actually, let me just take you through how Brexit is going to work. We need to negotiate a withdrawal agreement between the UK and the EU. That is what we're negotiating at the moment. I have every confidence and faith that that withdrawal agreement will be negotiated and will be agreed before the end of the Article 50 period on the 29th of March next year. If and when that withdrawal agreement is signed and agreed and ratified and enters into force, we will enter into an implementation period which lasts from the end of March next year until the end of December 2020. It's about a 19-month period. During that implementation period, the UK will be treated like a member state of the European Union, and all the laws and regulations and directives of the European Union will continue to apply to the UK. During that period, we are free to negotiate new trade deals, new bilateral agreements, entry into new trade blocs with other countries and other trade blocs around the world. And when that implementation period ends, those new agreements will enter into force. So the UK will know the shape of its future trading relationship and know the way in which the UK will look in its relationship with the rest of the world by the end of the implementation period. If, and I don't think this is very likely, if no withdrawal agreement between the UK and the EU is agreed, on the 1st of April next year, we will fall back on WTO trading terms in our trading relationship with any country with which we currently trade through an EU agreement. That includes Morocco. That means that there will be WTO tariffs placed on the import and export of goods between the two countries. We'll have to work very quickly to get a new trading relationship into place to avoid those tariffs, which will be detrimental to us, to our companies, but also to you here in Morocco. So let us hope that we get a withdrawal agreement and we can move forward. But I want to talk quickly about the EU project. The EU, let's not forget, was set up in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. You had the Iron and Trade Agreement, you had the Euratom, and that led forward to the Treaty of Rome, and then the Benelux countries who came together. You know the history better than I do. The problems that led to the Second World War were problems of nationalism and protectionism and isolationism. And I think the European Union project is in trouble, because I think that for a long time we, and I include myself in this, the liberal elite have just assumed that everyone understood that this was a supranational project that was trying to defeat insularity, protectionism, nationalism. And we never made the argument about why the European Union counted, why it mattered, what the good that it stood for was. And as a result, we didn't notice that there was a huge number of people who were being left behind. We all thought globalization was great. We all thought internationalization was great. We all thought the benefits were so blindingly obvious that we didn't need to make the argument in favor of it. And so we didn't. And we ignored that large chunk of population who had been left behind, who had been ignored, who globalization and industrialization and supranationalism had pushed into the margins of society and had left very vulnerable. And I think if there's one thing we should learn from Brexit, is that if we believe in an ideal, it is not simply enough to believe in it. We need to go fight for it. We need to keep making the argument for it. We need to engage with those who oppose it. We need to be able to stand up for what we believe in and make that argument and be prepared to keep on making it. Not simply assume that everyone sees the world through our eyes. That means for me, to come back to where I started, that international relations are even more important. It means that for me, when I look at the British relationship with Morocco, it's a thin relationship. It has been for a long time based purely on counterterrorism and security. That is insufficient for any relationship. It is especially insufficient, oh, thank you very much, for a bilateral relationship between two countries. Because relationships are based on much more than that. And so one of the things I've tried to do since I've been here is to push out the relationship into cultural exchange, into educational exchange, into sporting exchange, to look at commercial, to look at things like bringing across exhibitions of British painters or sculptures, to bring across British sporting teams. The British show jumping team is here at the moment in Morocco, the first time ever. We brought across the Oxford boat race team to row against the Moroccan national team on the river Boureg Reg earlier this year. We brought across a British chef to cook here with Chef Moha, who I'm sure you all know. So we are trying to push out into other areas. But amongst those areas, the most important is education. And as I started by saying, without education, there is no future. You are the future in this room. I think we should work together. We can work together to bring British schools here, to bring British universities here, to create active, effective links, exchanges of professors between Morocco and the UK. I'm going to end where I began by saying I'm thrilled to be here this evening. It's a huge privilege for me to be here. There is actually a mafia within the British Embassy which is growing, and there's very little I can do to control it, and that is the Akhawayn mafia. Every time I turn round, there is another member of the Akhawayn University who is working in my embassy. I'm beginning to think it's a plot to overthrow the embassy. But I can say, in all honesty, that if you are churning out people like that, who are such an asset and a resource, a precious resource for my embassy, then there is a huge future for you, for the people who are graduating at the top of Akhawayn. You are the future. Go and make it.
I'm a computer science student. So my question is, when you were talking about how globalization did marginalize some other countries and categories of people, I don't get specifically which parts of the word, for example, are you talking about, or yeah.
So I mean, I think it's a really interesting point, because it is every society in the world that has been affected by globalization. And in the UK, one of the reasons for the Brexit vote is there are large swathes of British society who felt that globalization has either passed them by or has directly impacted on them. So we talk about Polish plumbers. It's a real kind of classic British problem. If you believe in something, you have to go and make that argument. You have to engage with it. You have to keep fighting for what you believe in and not simply sit back and say, everyone thinks the way I do.
Hello, my name is Mara Bourbout. I'm majoring in international studies with a concentration in international relations. You said in the beginning of your speech that you think that the referendum was not necessary. You did say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know more about your position and your perspective, your personal position, and whether you have an alternative.
So, I restate, it's very, very important for me to state this, as an ambassador and a civil servant, my personal opinion and my private and personal opinion and my public role are two different things. So just to restate for the internet, I will do everything I can to implement the government's decision to go ahead with leaving the European Union. I will do everything in my power and I will fight with every fibre of my strength to make success of Brexit. Okay? Why did I think it was the wrong decision? In the election that took place in 2015, there was an opinion poll. And so where do you put Europe and the UK's membership of the European Union on your list of priorities? There were 18 priorities. And the UK's membership of the European Union was placed at 16th. So it was not a priority. So I think that instead of having a referendum on the membership of the European Union, which is a phenomenally complicated issue, we should have been addressing the causes of that irritation. And the causes of that irritation were that we had opened the gates to immigration into the UK with none of the controls that we were entitled to put in place under membership of the European Union. So we should have been addressing those issues rather than making this all about membership of the European Union. So we realised there was a problem, but we were addressing the wrong part of the problem. And what we've created is a period where for the last 2 and a bit years, government has been utterly preoccupied with Brexit. We've created a place where the country is very, very divided. Look at the opinion polls now, and it's still 50-50. And I know friends that are no longer talking to their friends, or families who are no longer talking to their families because one was Remain and one was Leave. So actually we've solved none of the problems in society by having a very divisive referendum. There are people that I work with, members of Parliament, who are members of the government, who are deeply opposed to the concept of Brexit, but who, like me, are putting aside their personal opinions in order to make a success of it. But, there are some very, very deep problems in the British society now about where that's pulling. It may even, if you read the BBC website today, pull the whole of the United Kingdom apart. Because Scotland is saying, we voted to remain in the European Union. We don't want to be pulled out of the European Union by a decision that was taken by England and Wales. Northern Ireland is saying, well, we don't want to leave the European Union either. And the DUP is saying, well, you're not going to place a border down between England, effectively, and Northern Ireland. And the European Union and the British government are saying, well, we're not going to place a border between the south and the north of Ireland either. WTO rules require us to place a border somewhere. So, there's some real tensions now that have built up within the constitutional framework of the United Kingdom. And the question for an individual private citizen is whether that cost is worth the potential future benefit. But I go back to sort of restating for the benefit of the internet and for the benefit of continuing to have a job the day after tomorrow. As an ambassador, I will do everything I possibly can to make a success of where we are.
Back.
So my question, basically, you elaborated on the economic implications of Brexit. Can you elaborate more on the security landscape of Britain? Internal security, and if there are any security dilemmas faced by the country after Brexit? Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't think Brexit will increase or decrease our domestic security. The threat remains. It's a severe threat. It has been for some time. The question is whether we will be able to continue to have security cooperation with our partners in Europe. And I see no reason to stop that. And in fact, that's been the stated position of both sides from the beginning. We benefit from that mutual exchange of information. We benefit from that mutual exchange of security knowledge. And I very much hope that we will continue to do it. because the scourge of terrorism, whether it's extreme right terrorism or Islamist-inspired terrorism or even extreme left terrorism, is a scourge that doesn't respect borders. So if you stop exchanging information, everyone is less secure. I know that we have very good relationship with the Moroccan counterterrorism community, and that is a relationship which I'm particularly pleased about and particularly concerned to maintain and make stronger. And the same goes for that with our European partners.
I have two questions. One is...
Thank God you're asking the question in English, because that's the limit of my Arabic.
How on earth can such a major decision in the United Kingdom be decided by 50%, 51%? Why isn't a higher majority required for such a major decision? And number two, is there any can we hold Brexit responsible for what happened to us in the United States? Is the Trump phenomena related to Brexit?
I think Trump is not related to Brexit, but I think Trump is related to the same problems we were talking about here, which is we forgot to make the argument. We forgot to defend our position. We forgot to keep going back and engaging with people and explaining why this is a good thing. Huh? If I don't bother explaining to you, I just say, well, if you're too stupid to understand, what the hell's the point engaging with you? Then you feel irritated already. Who the hell does he think he is? And we just forgot that the liberal consensus, the Washington consensus, wasn't necessarily the way that everyone saw the world. We just made that assumption, and that assumption led to a lot of marginalised, a lot of irritated, a lot of upset people. It led to Brexit. It's led to the rise of right-wing populism across Europe. Viktor Orbán in Hungary, or what's going on in Poland, and it led to Trump. So these things are not unconnected. They're all connected. You look, in Brazil, there's a populist who looks as though he might win the presidency. So this is a worldwide phenomenon. I've forgotten your first question.
Why isn't a higher majority required for?
So the UK is not used to referenda. And if you look at places like Switzerland, you say, I can't remember the exact figures, so forgive me if I get them wrong, there has to be a 75% participation rate, and you have to, in order to change the status quo, you have to win by 66%. Now, that reflects the Swiss constitution, the Swiss make-up. They have plenty of referenda, and it reflects the way in which they do elections. In the UK, as you will know, because you've all studied international relations, and the only country worth studying, obviously, is the UK. Forget France. Forget the United States. United Kingdom. You've just got the S and the K wrong. In the UK, we have first past the post. So if I'm standing against you in an election, it doesn't matter that I beat you by one vote. I beat you, and that means I go to Parliament and you don't. And that was reflected in our referendum. You just have to get 50% plus one vote, and that's the decision. You can argue all night. We can stand here all night and argue whether it was right for David Cameron to call the referendum. It was right for the referendum to be won and run the way it was. We can argue about whether the decision should have been greater. The decision has been taken, and now our job as civil servants is to implement it and make a success of it. And I'm confident that that's what we'll do, because that's what the UK does. So that's where I stand.
Last question before we... Okay, same time.
Your Excellency, it is an honor to have you among us this evening. So in the last year, we have seen many events, which, for example, which concerned Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, in which these leaks show that people have seen they had this advertisement which shifted their opinions toward political decisions, such as the election of Trump in the United States, or even Brexit itself in the United Kingdom. So do you think that if it wasn't for such an involvement of Facebook and Cambridge Analytica in this landscape, would it have been the opposite of what we're seeing now? And if so, is there by any chance that maybe the UK abolishes such referendum and goes back to the way it was? Thank you.
So I think I'm what you would call a libertarian. I believe in the absolute freedom of press. I believe in the absolute freedom of the internet, and that carries with it risks. If you are not responsible with freedom, so with my freedom comes responsibilities. Yeah, you can't have freedoms without responsibilities. You can't have rights without obligations. And so, if I believe in my freedoms, I also believe in other people to be responsible. And there are a number of irregularities that have surfaced about Brexit and about Trump's victory. Can you rerun the past on the basis of a precept that you find out afterwards? No, you can't. If it had been illegal at the time to run those ad campaigns, then it would have been illegal. They would have been breaking the law, would have been prosecuted. It was not illegal. They ran ad campaigns. Despite all the investigations, not one legal challenge has stuck. Brexit, the Leave campaign overspent, but they overspent by a fairly small amount. None of that invalidates the decision of 17.4 million people, which is the biggest mandate that anyone has ever got in the history of the UK. So, yeah, you can argue about it. You could say, well, maybe we need more regulation of the internet. You can say maybe we need to have a press law that governs what you can write in the press, what you can say in the press. But I'm not in the business of retrospectively changing the law. One of the great things about the law is that you can't retrospectively apply it. I can't do something today which becomes a crime in the future for which I can now be prosecuted. And trying to prove a false negative. I had a very good friend who was in Hans Blix's team when they went into Iraq, and he famously said to me, Tom, it is very difficult to find a black cat in a black room with the lights off. It is even harder to find the black cat when it is not there. And trying to prove a negative of something that happened, or trying to prove a false positive, or trying to prove something about something that happened in the past when you don't have... Forget it. It's just a casse-tête. So, look, I leave you with thank you very much for entertaining me with your questions. This evening. It's been a real pleasure to be here with you this evening. I hope it's the first of many occasions. If you find yourself in Rabat, come and look me up. I'm sometimes in the embassy when I can be bothered to go to work, but thank you so much.